Hi everyone, my name is Samantha and welcome to my YouTube channel, Sewing in Switzerland. So today we are very cozy. We're making the Rebecca Page Relaxation Robe together. So I filmed a little sew along for us to create this one together, which is very exciting. I have made size 4 with no modifications whatsoever, apart from making the pocket bags a little bit larger and the belt loops a little bit longer, just so because I'm using quite a heavy pile material, so I needed that extra maneuver, and I like to have really big pockets so I can put dogs and snacks in them. So we're just gonna get straight into it today and sew up a dressing gown. Let's go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do before we get into it is I just want to draw your attention to a couple of changes that I've made to the pattern here. So you can see we've got the pocket pattern piece and also the belt loops piece. Now I'm using kind of relatively thick fleecy dressing gown material here. So when I'm using that kind of thick fabric or fabric that has a pile or something that's you might struggle with sewing with in terms of thickness, I tend to make the fiddlier items slightly larger. So the belt loops here, you can see I've cut around the pattern, but I've given a little bit extra fabric. It's because it gets quite bulky and quite fiddly when you do it with a thicker fabric on these small pieces. So just if you're using that kind of traditional dressing gown fabric material, I would definitely add a little bit extra for your belt loops, also your hanging loop if you're going to add on that optional extra, and also the pockets. The pockets are a pretty good size, but I like to have a large pocket on a dressing gown. I like there to be lots of room. I like to be able to fit, you know, a book, some snacks, maybe a bug or two inside my pockets. So I've just gone ahead and made them a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. So again, that won't affect the overall shape or change the actual construction of the garment in any way. So that would be my hot tip if you're using a thicker fabric, is go ahead and make those pieces a little bit bigger. And again, just before we get into the construction and the sewing of the actual dressing gown, or the relaxation robe, I should call it by its proper name, I just wanted to show you how we're going to add in the tailor's tacks for the pocket placement. So this is the front piece of the relaxation robe here. This is wrong side up, so I have specifically gone for a fabric that is a very obvious wrong side and a right side. So the right side has obviously got Team Potatoes and some other fantastic dogs in coats, and the wrong side is just a plain white. Okay, so I will remind you as we're going throughout that. So you can see I've got these little blue bits of thread here. And what you want to do is grab the pocket, whatever size that may be that you're making, and you're just gonna, when transferring the pocket measurements there, you just want to make sure that you're using the newer pocket size to mark your pocket placements there. And again, I've done it where I've forgotten to do this, and nothing terrible happened. The world did not fall apart. If your dressing gown pockets are slightly wonky, you will not be able to tell at the end of the garment, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But when we do come to attach the pockets, it might be nice if you have your pocket placements with tailor's tacks there, because it's just easier to line them up. But I wouldn't worry too much. It's just a good practice. So let's get into the very first steps. Okay, so the first steps that we're going to want to take here is you want your back piece, and you want that laid with the right side facing up towards you. So you can see this is my right side, it's the one with all the dogs on it. Then you're going to want to grab your front piece, and you're going to want to lay that down, right sides down, so that the right side, the dogs, are touching. Okay, so you see we've got these edges up here, these shoulder seams up here. We're going to lay the front piece on top of that. So again, we'll be looking at the wrong side of the front piece, and we're just going to line it up along this armhole here. And the piece that we're going to be sewing is along this shoulder up here. So just make sure that you've lined them up and then pop a couple of pins in. You might need extra long pins if you're using the dressing gown fabrics. There we go, looking good. So you're going to want to repeat that on the other side along the top here. And then we're going to go to our sewing machines and we're just going to sew a straight line across here. And if you are using these kind of furry fabrics or a fabric that's got quite a heavy pile, what you're going to want to do is use a zigzag stitch. So I wouldn't use a straight stitch on this because it can pull and it can snap really easily. So I'm just going to pop a zigzag stitch on that one. Okay, so just to reiterate, we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to do this 1/2 inch seam allowance along the shoulder edge here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to finish it using either a overlocker, or you can go ahead and use a zigzag stitch, or if you are using this kind of velour or pile style fabrics, I would recommend just using pinking shears and just run an edge of pinking shears if you're not going to use an overlocker on this, just because it's much easier. So again, if you're using a pile fabric, I would use a kind of not too large, but just a medium style zigzag stitch, and then go ahead and finish it with your overlocker or your pinking shears. But we'll meet back here and I'll show you what that looks like now. Okay, so I've gone ahead and zigzag stitched that and then gone over it with an overlocker, and this is what it should look like. So you can just about see I've got those mid-sized zigzag stitch, and I think it's about a 5 width by a 2 length, and then I've gone over it, which you can't really see with the overlocker there. So there we go. This is what it looks like open. I'm not going to go ahead and press that. I'm just going to leave that as is, because this kind of velour style fabrics does not press well, and I don't really want to melt it. So I'm just going to go ahead and, you know, it's bulky enough to be able to just finger press it, and then it will pretty much stay in the right place. So then we're going to flip it over so that we're looking at the right side, and we're just going to lay it out. I'm going to turn it around the other way so you can see that. So I'm just going to, there we go, hoik it on the floor a bit. I'm just going to zoom out a smidge so that you can see. So on the left hand side, this is the front piece that we've literally just sewn, and there's our shoulder seam there, and then we've got the other front piece on the other side here. So I'm just going to push that further away, and then on the other side here you can start to see we've got that kind of curve, which is where our lovely sleeve is going to go. So we're going to move on to that next. And we're just going to push that seam that we just made there towards the back, so towards the back piece, which is the fuller, the bigger piece there, and we're just going to push that away, and then I'm just going to lie it flat so that you can see the shape, which is where we're going to be attaching the sleeve to next. Okay, looking good. So you can see we've got that kind of lovely scoop. That's going to be where our sleeve lies. So you're going to want to go ahead and grab your sleeve piece, and we're going to find the top, and the top of your sleeve is, I'll just lie it out so you can see the shape there, is the side that's got that scoop. And again, if you've got like a directional print, you'll be able to see which way that lies. The dogs actually go in all directions. So if you've got a directional print, you're fine. So we're just going to go ahead and fold that in half along the top there, so you can see. Just going to line that up nicely, and then you're just going to pop a pin in that midway point. There we go. So we know now where that middle pin that we've just put in lines up with the shoulder seam that we've made. So we're just going to lie that on top, and that's right side to right side. So we're going to be looking at the wrong side of the sleeve right now. And then you can see where it's on the curve, so it's going to be a bit fiddly to line that fabric up, that sleeve head that runs along here to along this curve. And the way that we do that is nice and slow. So I'm just going to grab that middle pin, I'm going to remove it, and then just pin through both layers there. And then with lots of pins and lots of fabric manipulation, we're just going to very slowly work our way along. I'm just going to re-angle that one slightly. There we go. We're just going to very easy breezy. And the trick to getting that curve to fit nice and flush to the sleeve there is to do it in small increments. So we're just taking a small amount of fabric at a time and popping a pin in it. And you'll find that it curves quite easily around that bend there. So we'll just go to the end and I'll just show you what that looks like. There we go, we've gone halfway around with our sleeve there. So if you open it up, it will look like that. So once we've stitched that all together, it will look nice and flush. So you want to fold that back, then you want to continue on the other side all the way around. So I'll just complete that and then meet you here. So I've gone the whole way around the sleeve head there. You can see we've got lots of pins, and that kind of the extra pins help manipulate the fabric into that curved shape that we need there for the sleeve head to fit nice and snug. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the machine. I'm going to do a 1/2 inch zigzag stitch across there all the way along, and then you want to finish it with your finishing method of choice, and that can be either your pinking shears if you don't have an overlocker, or an overlocker stitch just to stop any fraying there. And then we'll meet back here, and then we can do the other side of the sleeve while we're at the machine as well. So we'll meet back here when we've done both sleeve heads. Okay, so I've gone ahead and stitched the sleeves to the bodice pieces there. So this line that runs along here, well, we've got some Franken dogs going on here. You can see that's this piece is the sleeve, so I'll just show you up close what that looks like. And we'll just go along, and you can see we've got that seam here that attached our front piece to our back piece, and now the sleeve here. So once you've attached both of them, what you're going to want to do is at the end of your sleeve, go ahead and just run a set of pinking shear cuts or overlock that raw edge on the very sleeve edge there, and then stitch a zigzag stitch, just a running stitch all the way along of 1/2 inch, and that's just going to be our guide stitch for when we come to do the hem later on, the sleeve hem. Doing that row of stitches just adds a little bit of stability, and it makes it so much easier to just fold that 1/2 inch down and then stitch it on top. If we don't do that stitch, then you kind of just end up with this flappy fabric, and it's basically harder to manipulate. So just finish your raw edge and then add a guideline stitch, just a running stitch. If you're using a pile fabric, definitely do it in a zigzag stitch, and do that on both sleeves. And then we can put that aside for a minute. We can forget about the sleeves, because after that, what we want to do is move on to the belt loops. Now, just for full clarity here, if you are making the baby sized version or the children's sized version, do not add belt loops, and that's for safety reasons. You'll just go ahead and stitch the belt itself directly to the back of the dressing gown. You will not add belt loops if you're making a children's size. So assuming that you're making the adult version, like myself, we've got our 2 belt loops here. So you're going to want to fold that right sides together lengthways. Okay, and we're just going to stick a couple pins in that. Lovely jubbly. This next step is probably the worst step. It's the most fiddliest. Oh, and also I will say my throat is a little bit hoarse at the moment. And I think that is because these pile fabrics tend to fray quite a lot. So if you are working in an enclosed space with a furry style fabric, I do recommend putting a mask on and making sure that you've got a window open, because it can get just in your chest a little bit where the fabrics do fall apart. So lovely. What we're going to do is we're going to stitch our zigzag stitch 1/2 inch along there. We're going to drop the needle, pivot, and come all the way down this side here, and then just off the edge, because we're going to turn them out together in a minute. So just like an L shape, and that's on both of your belt loop pieces. So we'll go ahead, finish those sleeve edges, fold our belt loops in half, make that L style stitch, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I'm back from the machine, so I'll just show you how our sleeve ends look. So I've gone ahead and overlocked those edges there, and then I've done a zigzag stitch all the way along at 1/2 inch. And what I mean by stability, so when we come to do our sleeve hem there, you can see how easily that folds over on that stitch there. And then we can just kind of give it a good finger press, or if you've got one of those seam rollers, they're really good for things like this. And then it just sits there. You can see the bit that I haven't done and the bit that I have finger pressed there. And that will just hold when we come to do the hem on our sleeve there. So we can just kind of forget about that for now, because we're not going to need that for a little while. So back over to the belt loops. So you can see here I've done the 1/2 inch stitch all the way along and then down. And instead of going ahead and overlocking these, we're just going to trim close to the edge there. You can use pinking shears as well, which might actually have been a better bet. But we don't need to overlock because we're going to be turning these out the other way. So just make sure you trim off those thread tails as well. It's really hard to do this through a camera. And then we've got one end that's got the hole. So what we're going to do, and this is honestly the worst bit, it's so fiddly. You're just going to push that belt loop through to the right side now. And I recommend making a nice cup of tea and having a sit down while you do this, because it can take a little while just to shimmy that on through there. So I'll just finish pulling both of those through, and we'll meet back here for the next step. Okay, so it feels like it took a month to turn these out. So what we're going to do now, especially if you're using this style of fabric, you just want to really just finger press it down so that the seam is nice and straight on the side, like that. Because again, you can't use an iron on this. Lovely. And then we're going to find our back piece. And you should have a notch along your back piece that you made your notch on there. There we go. Yeah. Thought I'd missed it then. So then you want to grab your belt tie. And so we're going to deviate slightly because of the bulk in terms of how the pattern says to do it. So the pattern says to fold your belt loop in half and then just pin it onto here, but you can see we've got 3 very thick layers there. So an alternate option is you're just going to grab one end of your belt loop, doesn't matter what end, and we're just going to pop a pin and we're just going to line it up next to that notch, because we want enough room as well when we come to thread the belt tie through. You don't want to get stuck. And we're going to do the same again on the other side. So grab that loop, make sure that it's not twisted, and just line it up the other side of the notch. There we go. So you can see we've now only got a couple of slightly thicker layers. Okay, and you want to make sure, I'm just going to move that one, that your belt loop hangs off the edge a little bit. Because if you have it too far back or you have it nice and flush, then sometimes it can shift when you're sewing it. So you do run the risk of it kind of pulling. And also it's going to get a lot of use. It's going to be, you know, a very heavily maneuvered piece here. So if you just pull it ever so slightly forward, when it comes to trimming it, there's going to be no gaps, certainly no chance of it being right on the edge and just pulling out there. Lovely. So we're just going to go add a basting stitch, and that's basically just do your zigzag stitch as we've been doing, but just slightly inside that 1/2 inch seam allowance, so it's not over. So you just want to make sure we're just slightly closer to the edge on that, and just run all the way across until you come over the edge, and then back tack to add extra security there to ensure that it doesn't move when we come to pin it all together. And then you want to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so this is what it will look like when it's all stitched down. You can see I've used the zigzag stitch there. Looking good. So that's all ready to go. On to the next step now. Okay, so the next step here is you want to lay your dressing gown now with the right side facing up. So this piece here that we're looking at is the back piece. And then what you want to do is fold the front piece that we've got here over on top of this, so they're right sides together. And you can see that we've got this kind of sleeve shape and then this side seam here. So we're just going to grab the pins and we're going to pin all the way from the edge of this sleeve all the way down here under the arm here, all the way down. And you want to be really careful because you've got your tie belt loop here, so you want to make sure that that is sandwiched in between the front piece and the back piece. So right sides together, little sandwich with your belt loop inside. And then we're just going to pin all the way down here. So I'm just going to do that now and then show you what that looks like, and then we're going to stitch it. Okay, so you can see where I've pinned from the very edge of the sleeve there. Make sure that that hem on the edge of the sleeve, if you did press it and fold it down, make sure that's open, so unpressed. so that it all lines up, ready for when we do the hem later. So we've pinned all along there, all down around the underarm and all down the side. And now what we're going to do is stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to finish it, and we're either going to use our pinking shears or our overlocker. I do want to just make you aware of where we sandwiched the belt loop inside here. Do be careful if you're using a particularly thick fabric when you go over that. So remember, use your zigzag stitch and take it nice and slow, and just be kind of careful because these thicker fabrics can struggle with the home sewing machines there. So just kind of take it slow, take it easy, and just be mindful of that in case the needle snaps or something. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and repeat that on the exact same other side. Again, with the pinning and the 1/2 inch seam allowance and the finishing, and then we'll meet back here for the next step. And this is the point where it actually starts to look like a dressing gown, so it is very exciting. Okay, so I'm back from the machine and I've sewn up the sides. So this that I'm holding here now is the actual sleeve. So we're just going to find that edge seam on the outside and follow it down. So we've got the underarm seam where it crosses over there. And then we've got our belt loop, and then it goes all the way to the end. So it kind of looks like this. And then on the inside, I'll just show you how that looks. Again, we've just got our zigzag stitch, then our overlocking finish, or you can use your pinking shears. And you can see here where the belt loop is. It's a little bit bulky, but it's not too bad. So now we're going to push this all aside. We don't need this for the minute. We're going to need our front kind of cowl pieces. Just seeing what she calls them. The name of the pattern piece. The belt. The collar. There we go, the collar. So we've got our 2 collar pieces here, and you should have 4 in total. And what we're going to do is grab 2 of them and just put them right sides together. So the dogs are on the inside. And then we're going to grab our pins and we're just going to pin along that very top edge. So ignore the rest of it for now. And you want to make sure that you're kind of pinning the mirror image, and you'll know because A, they won't be right sides together, and B, you can see very slightly. If I lie it flat, it might be easier. We've got that kind of pointed edge here, and it slants ever so slightly, and you've got that curve of the collar there. So just kind of look out for that and make sure that everything lines up correctly. And then we're just going to continue popping our pins along, and you're going to do this with the other 2 collar pieces as well. I'll just put this final pin in just to show you very quickly how that looks. There we go, and I'll just zoom in. So we're going to sew our 1/2 inch seam allowance along the top, and then you're going to go ahead and finish that raw edge with either your pinking shears or your overlocker. And you're going to do that with the other 2 collar pieces as well. And then we're going to meet here and we're going to actually put them together and make one collar piece then. So remember just that top edge for now, 1/2 inch, and I'll see you back here. Okay, so I've gone ahead and stitched the collar pieces together, all 4 of them. So we've now got 2 separate pieces. And what we want to do is make that into one collar piece. So we need to pin the all around the outside and then sew all around the outside of the collar, which is this top edge here. And you might be looking at yours thinking, well, how do I know which one's the top edge and which one's the bottom edge? You can tell we've got this kind of very small U shape here, and this will be the part that goes around the back of your neck. So you can see that that goes in and up like that. That is the bit that we will not be sewing. It's along the top edge here. So you want to lay one out with right side up, so dog's facing towards you. And then you want to get the other piece that we've sewn. I'll just zoom out a little. And then you want to get the other one that we've sewn. Again, if you're using, you know, a fabric with a pile and you can't press it, just either use a seam roller, which I still can't find mine, or go ahead and just finger press that to the side. And of course, if you're using a linen or a cotton or a waffle or anything like that, you can go ahead and give that a nice press. So then you're going to lay that over the top. You want to line up those seam edges there. And you can tell that you've got the right piece because they'll be right sides together. There we go. So we're going to pin all the way along this top edge. So I'm just going to go off camera because it's quite awkward behind the camera and pin that, and then I'll show you what that looks like now. So I've gone ahead and pinned that all along the top edge here, as you can see, all the way along. And don't worry if you get to the end here and it doesn't line up perfectly and you've got one side that's slightly longer than the other. We can just trim that down and adjust it on the hem when we get to that point. So if you've kind of got that little predicament, don't be thinking, oh no, what have I done? It's something that we can very, very easily amend further down the line. So yeah, our 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then finish it with your overlocker, or just trim it down with your pinking shears. And we will meet back here afterwards. Okay, so I'm back from the machine and I've gone ahead and I've stitched it with our zigzag, and then I've gone over with the overlocker there as well. So if you don't have that, just use your pinking shears and grade quite close to the seam because it's going to remove some of that bulk. And then we're going to fold it, oh that's nice, right side out. And we're just going to finger press all the way down along that seam there. Again, if you've got like a cotton fabric or anything that's easy to press, you can go ahead and just press that with the iron now. You can, I mean, it is possible with these pile fabrics to use a kind of slightly damp towel and put that down over the fabric and then go over it. But I did try with a sample piece of this kind of minky style velour pile fabrics, and it just didn't really take very well at all. It just kind of went a bit sticky, a little bit melted. It just wasn't worth it. So again, use a seam roller if you can find your seam roller, and just roll along that seam. And all we're really doing is just lining it up. And you want to go all the way down, and I'll just show you what that will kind of look like, so you can see the difference between the left side, which I haven't done yet, and it's kind of folding over itself, and just briefly along here, and it's sitting much nicer. So I'm just going to go ahead off camera and kind of make sure that the edge of that seam is sitting on the very outside edge, is what we're aiming for. So go ahead and either press that with your iron or finger press it or seam roll it, and we'll meet back here for the next step. Okay, so I've gone ahead and given that a little finger squish, finger press, and now you're going to need the main body of your dressing gown again. And we're just going to find that top edge. So you can see on the left and right here where my thumbs are, those are our front pieces, and this here in between is the back piece. So what we're going to do is we're just going to fold the back piece, lining up those front kind of edges, and this can be a little bit rough. We're not going for 100% accurate, and just find that midpoint and pop a pin in it, because we want to line up this back piece. I'll just zoom in so you can follow along, and then I'm going to grab our collar piece here. Actually, I'll zoom out, it's probably a bit easier. I'm going to find that back piece, and you can see we've got those two pieces now. So we want the raw edge side, and we want to line that up onto the right side with the middle of that back piece. So bearing in mind it's going to be quite bulky here, just going to grab that pin, pop it in here, because you've got the seam edges that you've pinking sheared or overlocked, you've got the actual collar pieces, and you've got the edge there, so it's going to be quite bulky, so you want to take that nice and slow on the machine. I'm just going to line that up again, it looks a bit wonky. There we go, that's better. You want to pop a pin in it, and then you want to go around all of the outside of the dressing gown here now, so you can see where it goes all the way down with the outside of this collar piece. As it's a lot of fabric, and if you're using a bulky fabric, it's going to get heavy, it's going to get a little bit all over the shop. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin it, and then what I'm going to do is I'll lay it out here so you can see what that looks like a bit easier, rather than just seeing a big jumble of fabric there. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pinned all of that, and now I've laid it out on the floor so you can kind of see what that looks like. So I'm aware it kind of looks like a really jumbled blanket, so I'm just going to point out where everything is. Here we've got one sleeve, here we've got another sleeve, and this is the outside edge that we've now attached the collar to. You can see it all runs up and around, and you can see the pins there as it comes down. So it's that very outside edge that we've pinned the collar to, and then if I fold that away, you can kind of see where that collar piece will look now. So I'm going to take it to the machine, and I'm going to stitch up that very edge piece there that I've gone ahead and pinned. So I'll meet you back here. So you want to do the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and on top of that you want to either overlock it or use your pinking shears to finish it off, and then we'll meet back here. Okay, so I've just brought you with me to the machine here for a minute, because I wanted to show you what it looks like to sew those 3 layers of fabric, especially if you're working with a bulky fabric there. I'll just check you can still see. Okay, great. So we're just going to sew a bit together. So again, you want your zigzag stitch on. You just want to make sure that the edges line up really well. You want to take it nice and slow, especially over those bulky parts. And you don't want it so that it's dragging on the ground here. You want to kind of keep it in your lap, or if you have a bigger table or bigger sewing space, you want to make sure that it's not kind of pulling towards the floor, because that will cause this to pull out of shape, and the result won't be it won't be what you want it to be. You can see that I'm doing here, as we're moving further along, take a pin out. You want to make sure that the fabric is pointing away from the machine, so it's not like this draping towards you, because that will warp what you're sewing, and it won't have the right direction, and it will pull, and it, you know, your stitches might snap. It can cause a whole myriad of problems. So you just want to make sure that as you're going along, that your fabric is pointing away from the machine, and it's not pulling towards the floor or dragging anywhere. As it starts to curve around, you just want to follow that curve with the measurement on your sewing plate there, so you're 1/2 inch. So you can hear that it is struggling a little bit, but it is doing the job. I think if we went any faster, we might break a thread or break a needle. So you just want to take it really nice and slow and just kind of work your way along. So I'm just going to do the rest off camera now, and then we'll meet up at the end. Okay, so I've got the collar stitched on and back off the machine. I'm just going to zoom out and then we can take a look at it. So this is the inside. So you can see the stitching and the overlocking there like we just did together, and it goes all the way down the whole length of the robe. And this is the right way round now. So you can see the top bit that we've got there where we pinned that middle section, if you remember. So when you've got it on, that will kind of fold down or fold up, depending how nice and cozy you want to be. So this is what it looks like from the outside all the way down. So we're actually going to move this aside again now, and we're going to move on to the pockets, and then I promise we're actually almost there. So I'll just grab the pocket pieces and we'll take a look at them. Okay, so I've just got the pocket pieces now. I'll just zoom you in there. So I've gone ahead and put a pin at the top edge of the fabric that I want the piece to be the top. So if your fabric is like solid colour, it doesn't really matter. But if you have like a print or a section that you particularly want in a directional way, go ahead and just pop a pin to mark where the top edge is, because it can be really easy to get that muddled up and turned around. So what we're going to do now is we're going to grab both pieces and we're going to go ahead and overlock all four corners, or if you're using pinking shears, just go ahead and do a little pinking shear trim on all four corners. And then we are going to go ahead and put a 1/2 inch line of stitching with our zigzag stitch on all four corners again, because with this pile fabric it is obviously difficult to press, and that, as we mentioned earlier, that line of stitching holds stability so that we can fold that under and have more kind of stability when we're turning that in and stitching it to the front of our piece. So just go ahead and do that on both pieces, and then I'll meet you back here and I'll show you what that looks like and our next steps. Okay, so I've gone ahead and overlocked all the edges of the pocket, and then I've gone around with a 1/2 inch seam allowance just on the edge there. So now if you're using a non-pile or an easy ironable fabric and you've been ironing and pressing your pieces as we go, what you want to do now is go ahead and just press those pieces under. So you're going to fold down that 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. Be careful on the corners there, and you're just going to press that with your iron. If you are using something that you've not been pressing, like this kind of fabric, a minky or velour style fabric, what you're going to want to do is just top stitch. So we're going to fold it down, but instead of pressing, we're going to top stitch all the way around. And again, also, if you want that top stitch finish and you're using a cotton or a linen or a fabric that you've been pressing, you can go ahead and top stitch that as well if you want to. So I'm going to turn it to the wrong side. I'm going to start by folding the sides down, and then I'm just going to pop a pin. And you can see how easily that folds down with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. It just kind of holds itself. So that kind of row of stitches really act as like a stability function, which is really great. So we're just going to pin all the way along. And then when we get to the top here, and remember, keep an eye on which end is your top end. Then I'm just going to fold that. I'm just going to move that pin a bit lower. I'm going to fold that top edge down like that. So I'll stick a pin in it. And then you want to flip it over once you've done all four and just check. There we go. that nothing is kind of poking out from that fold. No kind of loose bits or anything. And then you're just going to go around on your machine and you're just going to sew a row of stitches just to secure this all in place. So you're going to fold down all 4 sides. So I recommend folding in the sides first and then folding up the bottom and then folding down the top. And then you're just going to run 4 rows of stitches. Gosh, I don't know if you could hear that on camera, but a load of snow has just kind of tumbled off the roof. Makes a really loud kind of landslide noise. It's a bit scary. I don't know if the camera picked it up. But yeah, anyway, you're just going to run your stitches all the way around all 4 corners there like a top stitch. And then we'll meet back here once we've done both sets of pockets, and then we can pin them onto the actual body piece and get them fixed on. Okay guys, so I've gone ahead and stitched that down, and this is what it looks like. So you can see the little folded down bits are on the inside and you actually can't see them on the outside, so it's not like sticking out or anything. So then I've laid out the front left hand piece of the dressing gown. So this is the one that will come over the left front side of you, and to the right here is the back. And then we've got our tailor's tacks from earlier, or our markings, or however you choose to do your pattern piece markings on the fabric. And a couple of them have fallen out because I've been throwing it around, to be honest. So I'm just going to zoom in ever so slightly. You can just about see here, there's a thread, there's a tailor's tack thread here. But, you know, if you've lost your tailor's tacks, I'm just going to move that pin that marked the top piece of the pocket there onto the outside now. Yeah, so if it's gone a bit AWOL, do not worry. The pockets are individual to you. So we're going to pin them on, and then you're going to try on the dressing gown and make sure that the pockets are in your preferred place, because you can just move them. You can just put them wherever you want. You can have them higher, lower, whatever works for you. You don't have to go by this guideline. But if you have lost your pattern markings, okay, and you've got your pocket piece and you're thinking, I don't know where to put the pocket, note our belt loop here. Okay, so if you just come along slightly perpendicular to the look at us getting fancy over here. So you just come along slightly from the belt loop, okay? So just line it up with the bottom of that belt loop piece here, and then that will give you the guide of where the pocket markings are. So hopefully that helps you out if you haven't got that in place. So I am just gonna make sure it looks kind of straight-ish, and then finally remove that pin that's been marking our top piece of the pocket there, and just pin both layers of fabric together. I've also got a little tag that I want to pop in, so I'm just gonna, that looks straight-ish, I'm just gonna pop that in there as well, because who doesn't like a little tag, a little fun detail. And then we're just going to go around and we're just going to pin the pocket down, and then we're going to try it on. We're going to make sure that the pocket is where we want the pocket to be, because it is completely up to you. It's completely individual, so you can choose where it goes. I think as I've stitched this and been kind of messing around with it, I've stretched the pocket ever so slightly, because you can see it's got a little curve to the bottom there. But like I always say, and like I said on my New Year's resolutions, guys, we're not going for perfect. We are just going for did our best and had a good time, and that is totally cool. So that's what that looks like. Wonderful. Just gonna zoom out. Okay, so I've got the tag and everything in. I'm just gonna go try that on off camera just to make sure it's in the right place, and then repeat it on the other side with the other pocket. And remember, line it up with that little belt loop here if you haven't got your pocket markers. So just double check it's in the right place, and then if it is and you've pinned both pockets now, you're just going to go ahead and stitch with your 1/2 inch seam allowance, top stitch that all the way around, And remember, because I did this on my husband's, I've made this pattern so many times. There's one of those things that I do with my eyes closed, and it's got to the point where I'm now not, when I'm making it for myself, not filming it, I'm not perhaps paying as much attention as I should have it, and I stitched my husband's entire pocket closed so he couldn't actually use it. So that's fine, that's fine. Remember, don't do as I have done. Leave your pocket top opening open. Do not stitch across the top, okay? So we're just going down, around, and those three sides on both pockets, and we'll meet back here. Okay, so I've gone ahead and stitched that down, and don't worry too much if you are kind of struggling with it a bit. It's very, whoopsie, very bulky amount of fabric to get under the machine because you've got all this to kind of maneuver. So just take it slow, and if it's getting frustrating, take a break. I understand completely, you're not the only one struggling. So you can see I've gone a little bit wobbly. We've got a little upturn in the pocket here, but that's absolutely fine. Remember, don't sew the top bit closed. I've added a little cute label here. And you now have basically a wearable dressing gown. But we still need to do the belt and the hem. So we're going to go ahead and do the hem first. So let's grab the sleeve. Okay, you remember that kind of 1/2 inch that we made earlier to help us with the hem memory? So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. There we go. You're just going to fold that under, pin it on the inside, and then just run around with your zigzag stitch. You can refresh the pressing if you need to, if you're using a pressable fabric. So there you go. I have actually just tried mine on. I've been sat here for about half an hour just wearing it and basking in all its glory. The sleeves are a little bit long for me, and I know that they're gonna like tangle in food and just get on my nerves, so I'm actually gonna just leave that. I'm gonna go round again with a 5/8 of an inch kind of guideline row of stitching, and then I'm gonna fold it under and repin, and then just make that hem a little bit bigger. So I think I've got like really short arms anyway. Can never reach anything. So yeah, I'm just gonna make that hemline a little bit bigger because it's just gonna dangle in tea and all sorts. And then for the bottom, I'll just zoom out a little bit. Here we go. I'm just going to, okay, let's look at it on the wrong side. I quite like the length. I like a good long dressing gown. In the winter, anyway. In the summer I've got much shorter ones. But again, I'm just going to run a row of stitches on that bottom edge there with the overlocker. Again, if you don't have an overlocker, just pink along the bottom row of the bottom edge of the dressing gown all the way along now, and just kind of tidy up the bottoms here, make sure that everything is even. You can see I've got a couple, maybe a centimetre, no, maybe half centimetre extra on this side, so I'm just going to trim that off. So just kind of even it up, and then do your overlocking or your pinking finish, and then do your guideline stitches on whatever hem you would like. The instructions say to do a 1/2 inch hem. I'm probably, again, can make mine, well, 1/2 inch. I think that's approximately, I mean, just eyeballing it here, 1/2 inch, and that's not bad. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 1/2 inch guideline stitch. And then again, we can just fold it up, pin it, and then just run a stitch along there like you would an ordinary hem. And then I will just run to the machine, do that, and then I'll meet you back here so I can show you what that looks like. Okay, so finally I've got the belt pieces here, and what you should have is 2 long belt pieces, and I've put them together right sides together so the dogs are sandwiched in the middle. And then on one of the short ends here, just along here, I'm just going to pop a couple of pins, and then we're just going to stitch this together. And what we're going to do is basically make one long piece here. So we're going to leave that side, the other end, open, And we're just going to sew along here with our 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to go over with our pinkinches or our overlocking stitches, and then we'll meet back here. Okay, so I've stitched that together. We've got some little Franken-jog situation going on. So you can see I've gone ahead and overlocked that as well. So we're going to turn it to the right side now. And then we're going to fold it in half so that the right sides are touching the right side. And then we're going to pin. I'm just going to pop a couple of pins in where that mid seam is, just to hold it in place because it's got a little bit of bulk to it. There we go. And then I'm just going to come over a little bit because you're gonna want to leave a gap now, because we're going to be turning this into the right side once we've stitched it. So you can see between my thumbs, that's a big enough gap there. You just want to make sure that you've left that open. So don't sew a gap roughly that size, because we're going to be turning it the right side out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to follow that along now and pin up the rest of it. So we're just going to go the whole way along on both sides, apart from that gap that we've just left for turning. So I'm just going to carry on pinning all the way along off camera, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a sec. Alright, so I've gone ahead and pinned the rest of that so you can kind of see where it goes all the way along. It's hard to fit the whole thing in the camera here. And then here we've got our gap, so there's no pins in this couple of inches here, because we're not going to sew this. We're going to leave that open because that's where we're going to turn it to the right side out. So again, the pins go all the way along, right down to the end. And because we've got that opening here, we're going to stitch up the ends as well, because we don't need those open. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our machine here, and we're going to come along, we're going to lower the needle, and then we're going to pivot. So we're going to turn it around so it goes like a right angle, and then sew down there. And again, I'll show you once I've done it on the camera so you can kind of visually see how that looks. And then we're going to sew all the way down here until we get just after this midpoint here, and then we're going to stop, we're going to back stitch, and then we're going to jump, and then we're going to sew all the way down here, all the way along, and then we're going to drop the needle, turn it so we've got a nice crisp right angle there, and we're just going to go all the way down, and then we'll meet back up here to trim the corners and turn it the right side out. So you just want to make sure that you've got a gap of about 2 inches for when we turn it the right side out. So I'll go and stitch it up, and then I'll bring it back here so you can visually see what that looks like. Okay, so I'm back from the machine, and you can see I've stitched all the way along that edge there, and then somewhere around here we've got our gap. Okay, so what we want to do now is go to the ends here, and you can see we've got that kind of slightly bulkier, thicker bit of fabric on the corner there. We're just going to grab our scissors, and we're just going to snip close to that edge. There you go. And you can use your pinking shears. Be careful that you don't cut into the stitching, because that is not what we want. And then if you've got a lot of bulk here, you can go around the whole thing before we turn it out and just trim that off. And again, you can use your pinking shears on that. If your fabric is extremely bulky, what you can do is grade the seams. And basically, instead of cutting, as I did just then, the whole seam down, you just cut one of the seam edges, so you end up with it kind of staggered here, and that reduces the bulk even further. So depending how bulky it is, you can either trim the whole thing down all the way around or just one side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find that middle piece with the gap, which I've now lost. There we go. And we're just going to pull that through so that we're looking at the right side. So this is going to be a little bit fiddly because you've got to pull both sides through. So I was just making a cup of tea and having a sit down while you pull that all through there. So I'll just pull all that through off camera, and then I'll meet you back here so I can show you what the belt looks like and how we're going to close this gap once we finish turning them out. Okay, so after 3 years, I've turned it the right way out. So I'm just going to find our gap here. So again, if you're using a non-pile fabric, what you can do is you can go ahead and press that so that the seam is now kind of flush on that edge. If you're using a pile fabric or it's really, really difficult to press, you just want to go over either finger pressing it to the edge there or with your seam roller, which I think is somewhere with my clapper because I can't find that either. Anyway, so this is what your belt looks like, and now we've got this gap. So if you just kind of, there you go, let it lie natural, it should line itself up pretty good. So you'll just want to put a pin or two in there, and then you can either hand stitch it if you're so inclined, or you can go ahead and just top stitch that. Again, if it's a fabric that kind of hides the stitches, you could just get away with stitching that closed on a machine. But if you want it to be completely uniform the whole way around, what you can do is top stitch the entire belt, which would look nice, but you can't really notice in these pile fabrics so much. So I'm just going to go ahead and machine stitch that close to the edge there so that that keeps that seam nice and closed. And there we go. Then once that's stitched shut, we have our belt. Looking good so far. Congratulations, you have finished your dressing gown, and I hope you're very proud of it, and you've worked really hard, and I am very proud of you. So I've not had Team Potatoes with us during this Sewalong, unfortunately, because I've been using a heavy pile fabric and the fibres get in the air, so I didn't really want them in the room with us. So I've brought up one member of Team Potatoes to say hello. She doesn't want kisses, she just wants food. So I just want to congratulate you on your dressing gown, and do feel free to message me if you get stuck anywhere, or comment, and we can work through it together if you have any issues or problems you'd like to talk about. And I wish you all a great day, and if you enjoyed this Sewalong, do please like and think about subscribing to my channel, because it would make me and the puppies very happy. Thank you, and see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye.